I couldn't even remember when his last start was for us in the Premier League. So I think we've missed him 4 months when it comes to a start. I always look at you if it's about stats. But Chelsea, yeah, no, that's a long way.
It's Aston Villa up next for Arne Slot's Reds, and we were talking a lot about the threat that they pose, the new attacking talents they brought in January, in particular one fella from Manchester who many of us will already know. It's a tough game going to Villa Park, even if their form has not necessarily been that great right now. We were talking about Liverpool and the tight finishes that have happened in the last couple of games and getting over the line in games at this stage of the season. There was good news on some of the injury front. It appears Cody Gakpo will be out for this game, but he might be back for Manchester City on Sunday. Less good news for Joe Gomez, who may well need to have surgery on his hamstring injury. But we'll discuss all of that, plus my question to Arne, and frankly, his question back to me when we get back to the lab.
Hello again, we are here in the lab. First of all, I need to give you a bit of an apology. There was some sound issues on that first bit of footage that you just heard. Unfortunately, the battery died on my camera, so I had to use my phone, and it was a bit windy, and my phone wasn't quite equipped to deal with the wind. So yes, unfortunately, some of the sound was a bit in and out there. But we are back here now. Hopefully you can hear me crystal clear and loud. And we are ready to go through everything Arne Slot said in his pre-match press conference. By now, I'm sure you will have seen the clip of him having a little bit of a joke with Vinny O'Connor, the Sky reporter, about the Everton test event and just who scored the first goal at the Everton Stadium. There have already been some Evertonians talking about, oh, you're obsessed with us, etc., etc., yeah. No, this is just Arne Slot and who he is, and from being in the room and seeing how he reacts to certain things, he's always willing to have a laugh and a joke, particularly at Vinny's expense, particularly because, as most people know, he is a massive Everton fan. So don't put any more stock in it than needs to be Evertonians. It was just a joke. Unfortunately, something that wasn't a joke is the injury update, which is where we will start the show. First, the slightly better news: Cody Gakpo won't be at Villa Park, but there's a very there's a very good chance that he will be available for the Etihad, which is good news. Obviously, Luis Diaz got his goal against Wolves, so hopefully he'll be able to continue in that left wing role, having got a little bit more confidence back after toiling a little bit as a centre forward. The news for Joe Gomez, unfortunately, was not quite as good. He's going to be out for some considerable time. James Pearce asked if he was going to need surgery, and Slot unfortunately couldn't rule that out, said that it's a possibility that he might need surgery. Although he did say that he's not going to be out entirely for the rest of the season, there is still an expectation that he may be able to come back before the end of the season. But even the fact that that was mentioned tells you exactly how long that he's going to be missing. And obviously it's a massive blow for Joe personally. He worked so hard to come back, and then it didn't last, 8 minutes against Plymouth in the game in which he was leading the team. It's such a big blow for him personally. The good news, though, is that Liverpool do have Jarrell Kwanzaa that they can call on in terms of a backup, a centre-back, and he took a lot of confidence from the way he performed against Wolves. So hopefully he will be ready should he need to be called upon at points between now and the end of the season. And the chances are he will need to be called upon. Now it's time for my top takeaways. Top takeaway number 1, perception is everything. Slot was asked about the nervousness towards the end of the game at Wolves, and is that just a consequence of this stage of the season, and are we all going to be seeing this every game from now on? And true to form, Slot was very calm and measured in his response. He reminded everybody the fact that there's been plenty of games that have been tight towards the end where Liverpool have been holding on to a slender lead. As it turns out, the game against Wolves on Sunday was the 11th time Liverpool have won a game by a single goal, and the perception is that now we're talking about nervousness, whereas previously in those games it was just about hard work, getting you over the line, doing what it took to get the win. And now we're at this stage of the season, everyone kind of says that, oh, it's nerves, it's around title chases, etc., etc. And it seems to suggest that he and his team don't feel any more nervous now holding on to a slender lead than they did back in September and October. Now, obviously, that might not entirely be true when you consider some of the things that were happening on Sunday, some of the way that the Liverpool players were reacting. I don't just think of Robbo telling the cop to calm down, but some of the kind of skewed clearances and some of the things that we saw on the pitch as Liverpool tried to hold on to that lead. And even just the way they went about it was a little bit different. So a question that I thought about asking Arne Slot, but I changed my mind, was about the difference between their very first game against Wolves back in September, where Liverpool were holding on to a slender lead, and the fact that Slot was unhappy with the way that the last 10 minutes went because they squandered chances to go out and score a third goal and kill off the game. However, on Sunday, the method they took was they were prioritising keeping hold of the ball rather than trying to create any chances to score. So I did wonder, and I was going to ask him if he was happy with that tactic now, because we're at the end of the season where points and results are so important. I'm not sure we'd ever find that out. Maybe I'll try to find a way to ask him another press conference in the future. But it does tend to suggest that things are slightly different at this stage of the season, and it's not necessarily a linear thing where holding a lead at one point in the season is just as easy or as hard as holding a lead at the other end of the season. However, I do think there was a reason why Slot said this, and he was asked again, as I mentioned, about how Liverpool or how Slot himself and the team can mitigate some of these nerves, and I think this is him. This is him trying to do that, trying to remind everyone, look, we've been here before, earlier in the season, and we've held out. 11 times they have held out with a 1-goal lead. So while you may be thinking about the Everton game where they didn't hold out because that was literally just a week ago, there's been more times that they have held out than they haven't. So everybody should probably take that on board the next time they go into a game and it's tight towards the end of the game. Although we'll have to wait and see if that does indeed happen. Top takeaway number 2, defending is easier than attacking. Now, this isn't necessarily a shot at Virgil van Dijk or any of the defenders. Slot was asked about Wataru Endo and wanted to give him praise regarding the way that he's been able to come in at short notice and still be able to do a great job. And Slot did give him plenty of praise. The ability for him to stay ready, even though he doesn't necessarily know when he's going to come in, he doesn't know how long he's going to come in for. That's a really good skill, and it shows a lot of mental toughness. But then Slot did say that defending late in the game, coming on as a defender, is easier than coming on as an attacker. It makes it much more difficult. In fact, I'll read you the quote he said. If you have to play a player who needs to create after not many minutes, it's more difficult. Now, this does make sense. If you think about Endo's role, what does he do? He rolls up his sleeve, slaps on his gum shield, and he just runs about. His role is more about energy and application than it does about skill. So if you're asking the guys to come off the bench and score a goal, then they need to require skill, they need to require dexterity, they need calmness under pressure because they may only get one chance. So you need to have the calmness and the composure to then take that chance when it comes. So this was a question that was about Wataru Endo, but I feel like it wasn't really about Wataru Endo. You could almost say it's about Harvey, Elliott, or maybe even a Federico Chiesa, the players at the top end of the pitch. Because speaking of Elliott, there's been 8 occasions where he's been an unused substitute, and on some of those occasions, you think about Newcastle, you think about Everton, you think about Nottingham Forest as well. There were times when Liverpool needed a goal and he was still on the bench, and there's been plenty of times within those games and after those games where people were saying, well, why didn't he come on? Why didn't he come on? Well, maybe Slot's acknowledgement that it's more difficult means that it makes it harder for him to bring on a player in that scenario. Or maybe it's not that at all. Maybe it's just that Slot has more sympathy for those players when it doesn't come off. So that kind of refers more to a Federico Chiesa, maybe even a Darwin Núñez. Goes back to some of what we said previously about attackers coming off the bench and how hard it is for them to make an impact. So there's a couple of different readings to what he said there, but I do think that whole idea of it being harder for an attacking substitute than it is for a defensive substitute. It has a lot of merit, and it's something that we should probably consider as we're going down the stretch, particularly in tight games where we're hoping that our squad depth, particularly those 6 forwards and 7 if you include Harvey, Elliott, can help us make the difference in getting over the line in the Premier League title race. Top takeaway number 3, experience isn't linear. Now, Slot was asked about the benefit of having players within the dressing room who've been there, who've done it, who've won titles, and how important that will be going down the stretch. And Slot did say that yes, it was helpful, but not to put too much stock into it, because experiences are different. You mentioned obviously Alexis McAllister, who's won something at the World Cup, but even the players for Liverpool who won the Premier League title, Slot referenced the fact that on that occasion Liverpool was something like 20 to 25 points clear. So it's not really like they felt any kind of pressure in that situation. And that kind of brings up an interesting point that Liverpool, in general, Liverpool fans, Liverpool media seem to believe that when it comes to experience of these title run-ins, because Liverpool have won one, and there are people in the building who've won one, that gives them an advantage over Arsenal. But the reality is, when it comes to tight title races, both teams have ended up losing out to Manchester City. Liverpool on 3 occasions, Arsenal on 2 occasions. So their experiences of this kind of title race are very similar. So that doesn't necessarily mean to say that Liverpool are going to have any kind of advantage. You've still got to go out there. You've still got to win the football games. I think where Liverpool gets the advantage is the nature of the players themselves. The Virgil van Dijks, the Mo Salahs, the Alissons, the mentality that these guys have, and the way that they are able to keep everybody calm, keep everybody focused, to be able to achieve and to bring their best form at the point when it is most needed. If you think about those 3 players against Wolves, Alisson had the very key save early on in the second half against Marshall Menezes. Obviously, Mo Salah had the pressure point of the penalty, which he was able to score from. Virgil van Dijk on many occasions had to go out there and do some strong defending. And when it comes to the crunch, the fact that those players have the ability that they have and the mentality they have is important. And I would say that that's probably more important than necessarily just having been there and done it. Okay, now it's time for my question, or should I say questions, to Arne Slot. Here you go.
Hi Arne, you mentioned after the Wolves game that there's more of a mental toll of the recent games rather than necessarily a physical toll. Considering the play you're playing at the moment every 3 or 4 days, is it actually harder to get the players to reset and recharge mentally than it is physically? Because obviously they can sit in an ice bath or recharge, but they might still be thinking about the last game or the next game to come.
Yeah. No, it depends on how the last game went. And that's why I said after the Everton game, it wasn't a surprise to me that the players they weren't tired, but they were more tired than they maybe were in previous games, because the Everton game, the way that game went, all the things that happened during that game, and then especially in the last 8 minutes, that costs a lot of energy for everyone that was involved. That's why you can't compare tomorrow with last Sunday. I think we had a good win. We didn't play our best football, but to go away with a win gives us a different reaction than after the Everton game, where we eventually conceded in the last second with so many things happening. That probably was the reason why we were not that much, and not everyone, because I think if I had only 1 or 2 players in my mind that looked a bit exhausted, the rest didn't. But
so on the other side of that, the fact that they were able to come through a similar challenge against Wolves that they face against Everton, will that give them maybe a mental boost going into these next 2 tough games against Villa and Manchester City?
I think we managed many times already to get a win over the line, where I think we won quite a lot of games with 1 goal difference. I'm not even sure, but I think we did. But there were also moments, Newcastle away, where we conceded in the last minute. Man United at home, where we conceded, I think, 5 to 10 minutes before the end. And now this game, these things happen in a strong league as well, that you sometimes concede a goal in the last minutes of the game. Of course, it gives us confidence that we this time brought the win over the line. Again, like the Everton game, we didn't give anything away in the last 20 minutes. Till the moment at Everton, we all remember. We do take confidence from both last 20 minutes, because we had a certain feeling about the goal we conceded as well. So both games give us confidence, but yeah, it definitely helps that we didn't concede in the same manner as we conceded against Everton in the last minute.
Now, this question was really about tiredness. How much did that affect the second half struggles we saw against Wolves and against Everton? And how concerned should we be about this going down the stretch? I know there are some people who are looking at the load of a lot of our players and starting to get a bit concerned, particularly in light of what happened last season when the legs literally fell off. Now, we've heard quite a lot, and I must admit I've said this quite a lot myself, that the way that Slot does things in terms of the style of play, but also how they deal with injuries and the plans that him and Ruben Peters put together should mitigate some of what we saw from Liverpool last season under Jurgen Klopp. But there's also the idea, the fact that what we're seeing at the moment is making us think, well, maybe that isn't the case. And that's why Slot was kind of keen to, post-match against Wolves, he kind of focused on the mental toll of that game, and that's kind of why I went in that direction with my question. Now, he said that the justification for the way that the players looked tired towards Wolves was the way the game against Everton ended and everything that happened and the mental draining that you get from a game like that, which is fair enough, but Slot was very keen to kind of stress today that he felt that that was a very particular scenario and not one that we will see repeated game after game after game. And in fact, the fact that the Wolves game ended well and we were able to hold out should help in terms of a bit of a mental recharge when it comes to the game against Villa, and that we should see a better, fresher Liverpool, particularly in the second half. But I do think this is all part of the way the Slot tries to approach things, because he did concede that element of tiredness, but he was very much like they were a bit tired. Maybe not that much tired, and not everybody was tired. So he was very reluctant to concede exactly how tired they were. It was like, well, maybe a little bit, but not as much as people were going on about. In his mind, it was almost as if like, we're not trying to make this a thing. And I think that's what we've seen from Slot time and again this season. He's very much like, he doesn't want these things to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. He doesn't want it to get into people's head, because we've heard quite a few times, and just from, not even from football, not even from sports, just in life, it's one of those things where if you tell yourself that you're tired, you're more likely to feel tired. And if you don't tell yourself you're tired and you try to be like, I'm not tired, I'm okay, I can deal with this, then mentally it helps prepare you and helps you keep going. Now, obviously that's not entirely an exact science, and sports science in general will tell you, well, no, actually you are tired and actually you need to rest. And maybe we will see Arne Slot start to use substitutions a little bit more often than he has previously. It was mentioned that Wataru Endo came on for possibly his longest stint as a substitute against Wolves. Ryan Gravenberch was substituted after 60 minutes against Everton, which surprised quite a few people. So maybe we will start to see more of that happening as we get down the stretch. But the second part of my question I thought was also quite interesting from the way Slot answered it, because he then referenced the times when Liverpool haven't been able to hold out, Newcastle away, Manchester United at home. And if you look at the games after those games, so after Newcastle away was Girona away, after Manchester United at home was the first leg of the League Cup semi-final against Spurs. And both of those were sluggish performances. So you could quite easily say that Slot's right to say that the mental drain of not being able to hold on to a lead late on then affected him in the next game. So maybe the mentality is as much to do with it as physicality. So if Liverpool can avoid those kind of scenarios, then maybe they will have the fitness and the freshness to be able to keep going down the stretch. I guess we'll have to wait and see. First up is this game against Aston Villa, and I'm very intrigued to see how Liverpool approach this. Slot mentioned the fact Unai Emery's always got a game plan, and he's got some good attacking players. So I'm expecting it to be a good game. I have literally within the last 20 minutes found out that my accreditation's come through, so I will be going down to Villa Park. I'm looking forward to it. It's a fantastic old ground. So you will be getting a match report from me tomorrow evening after the game. there will also be more content from me on the Anfield wrap the day after. For those of you who are unaware, I was on the Late Challenge again yesterday. Go out and then find it there on YouTube. Of course, there's still my This Is Anfield columns to come. You can go and find those as well. And as I mentioned last week, I'm going to America next month. During the March international break, I'll be visiting Boston, I'll be visiting New York, and I'll be visiting Philadelphia. So you can come down and see me, hear me talk about Liverpool FC, and hear me play some of my favourite tunes and some of your favourite LFC sing-along flavour tunes as well. So there's plenty of opportunities for you to kind of get involved with me over the course of this season as Liverpool look to strike for glory. I'll see you next time.